Welcome to the Oreo Bookclub, where we read one book per week and we encourage you to do the same. So the way it works, every Wednesday we're going to release a new video where we tell you the book that we're going to read and you can read it with us for the week and then come back the following Wednesday to actually talk with us about it. So you can go in the comment, tell us your opinion, we're going to talk about some question that the book raised. That's how it goes.
Alright, so today we're going to talk about the white tiger. So basically we're following our servant, this is what he calls himself, back in India. And I'm not talking about the Bollywood, beautiful type of India. We're talking about the rural, corrupted, poor part of India. And basically we're following his story and how he becomes an entrepreneur, like he comes himself.
Yeah.
And that was a hard book. Should we give a little brief resume? We're not going to do like a big one because we assume that you already read the book, but just in case for the people who didn't read it, shame on you.
You're following the same person the whole book. So it's one guy that was born in darkness. That's what he called itself. India is separated between the darkness and the light. He's born to darkness, which means he's poor, he doesn't really have a future in front of him. But he doesn't want that, so he says, nope, not for me. And he uses entrepreneur skills to kind of get ahead. So he becomes a chauffeur and he becomes a servant of a very influential family. And then if you haven't read the book, watch out, this is spoiler alert, obviously. But he will end up killing his master, stealing his money, and starting his own business.
But that is only the end of the book.
Yeah.
Frankly, the whole book is him being a servant. And frankly, the mentality that comes with it, it's fascinating. Because frankly, you read this book and you're just like, human rights? I don't know her. Corruption all over the place.
My best friend.
Like, it was eye-opening. Truly, it was eye-opening. Because you read that kind of book and you're just like, is that real? It feels like a true story.
It's not a true story, right? But it is written by an Indian writer and it is inspired by the life that he saw around him.
And frankly, guys, the writing in this book, it's beautiful.
That's
Truly, it's beautiful. How he describes the places, you can smell the dirt. You feel that you're actually there.
You're sweating with the people.
You can smell the breath. You can smell how they live.
Like, I'm a very get to the point type of reader, and long description bore me so much. But this book, the description were interesting first to read, but they were made in a way that I didn't mind them.
No, truly.
It was described so vividly, but it wasn't long.
It helped the story because
Yeah.
it kind of set up where the character is and how he reacts to it, and you're just like, yeah, it makes sense. It truly makes sense.
So the moral of the story, what I understood from it, is that you have to get the opportunity that comes for you, or you have to make them happen for yourself. So it's kind of a very...
Well, the end justifies the mean.
Yeah, in a way. And that is my question to you. Do you think the end justifies the means?
I couldn't say that it doesn't. In the way that you see how our main character is. You feel like everyone in his life wants him to fail, wants him to stay at his place. He has a family, especially a grandma, who will suck everything out of him. She's entitled. So basically, he's working and they're basically asking for 3/4 of his salary and, you can keep the rest. We need it. And coming from, how do I say that? My mother was the person who had to send money to her family and she did it for a long time. Even though we were suffering, they didn't know that because they were like, hey, you're in Canada,
you're rich.
You're rich, you have a good life. But it wasn't the case. We were suffering too. And that frustrated me. So when I saw that the character had to do the same and they were basically like blackmailing him, like, hey, well, if you don't do that, this is going to happen. I felt so much rage for him. So in that case, and again, spoilers alert if you didn't read the book, basically, when he takes the money, he does it and he knows that his family is going to die. And yeah, the family dies. We know. We don't see it happening, but we know they're dead. And frankly, I was like, yeah, do it. Truly,
Do what you gotta do.
you have to do what you have to do, because at the end of the day, he was the one who would have died, I feel.
I don't believe that the means justify the end all the time. Desperate measure call for desperate situation calls for desperate measure. But in his case, I think he didn't have to kill his master. He could have stole the money, and that would have been fine.
You think?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Because again, killing the master was one of the first. He was kind of like already corrupting himself and not being the perfect servant. But I feel like killing his master was like just him freeing himself from his chains. But at the same time, do you think that the master would have become, because the master too, there is some development. He's not the same person as he was at the start of the book than at the end of the book. So what did you think about that? Do you think it's realistic for him?
Yeah, well, he had a life a little bit in America. So he was exposed to another culture. He came back and then he started his life in India, right? But he is more open to the main character. He goes down where he lives in his quarter and it's like, oh my god, how can you live in here? That makes no sense. I'll buy you a bed. I'll buy you a better utility. And the servant is in his servant mentality. So he's like, no, I'm fine, thank you. Like, do your thing. But he is growing a certain openness to the way people live, except for himself. And I think that's realistic because he was open to another culture in the past.
So basically he was treating our main character as an employee instead of a servant.
Yeah.
But as time passes, he kind of starts treating him more like a servant than an employee.
Yeah, I think he get used to it. And he was also very stressed. And when you're stressed, you're not at your best, right? So I think he just kind of like stopped thinking about it. There's one mention that came often in the book that's called the Rooster Coop. So he explained that when you go to a market, you see rooster coops everywhere, and they take the chicken out, they kill them, there's blood everywhere. The chicken can see what's happening, but they don't do nothing about it. They just stand in their coop and they're waiting to get killed. And so he drew that parallel between the chicken and the servants of India, or the people in darkness, where they stand their place and they don't revolt or they don't do anything about it. So that's the chicken's coop.
Because their mind has been broken. They're just like, well, it's going to happen, so why fight for it? It is what it is. Our main character, he doesn't want to be a rooster. He wants to be, and he describes himself as a white tiger, a creature that rarely happens. That's only once every generation.
Yeah.
And he describes himself like that because he doesn't want to be just a rooster.
There's one thing I do want to talk about. What did you think about the murder magazine?
Oh my god, the murder magazine.
I read it, I was like, oh my god. But it was so... I love the way they did it. So the servant always read murder magazine about how the servants killed their master. And I was like, what the heck? But like, the main character said, no, you're fine if they read it. Because there's consequences in the stories. And it shows that like the servants are always in prison and like they're not happy, right? You have to be careful if they start reading like Ganzi or like books with thoughts, and I was like, that is so true.
It's ridiculous, seriously. Alright, so there was something that I wanted to ask you.
Go ahead.
Our main character throughout the book, he becomes obsessed with the idea of sleeping with a blonde woman, like a blonde white woman. What do you think about that?
I think it came from, first of all, seeing his master do it. So that was kind of like, oh, once you're rich and successful, that's what you have to do. I think that's part of it. I think underneath it was very kind of like the glorification of America and like the difference between India. And throughout the book, at one point he does sleep with a blonde woman, but she's not actually blonde, so he freaks out and punches her. Well, slap her.
As one does, you know.
Yeah, of course. And at the end of the book, actually, he's not anymore attracted to blonde white women.
That's right.
Which, I mean, good for him, I guess, get your preferences. But I think it's because he finally made his peace with his life in India. It's no longer the like craving for America. It's here I am, here I made my money, I'm a comfortable man now. I kind of up the system and I'm at peace with that.
That's true, because he does say at the end of the book, like, hey, the time for white people has passed. The future belongs to us. brown people and yellow people. Why does he mention yellow people? Because basically the book, it's kind of like a letter that he's writing about his, his past, his present, his story basically, and he's writing that to a Chinese diplomatic person that's coming to visit. Yeah. Which frankly I was just like, so you're just going to tell him that you killed someone? I mean, all right.
Not the smartest move, but it's convenient for the story, so
truly convenient. Also, I wanted to talk to you about his nephew. So basically, again, for the people who didn't read the book, a little bit at the end of the book, his family sends him his nephew, and they're just like, hey, you're not sending us money, well, you better at least take care of that guy. Oh, and also we're going to arrange a wedding for you. So it was like two things. But what do you think about his reaction to his nephew? Because he slapped the guy.
Yeah, I didn't understand it. Like, I understand the anger towards the family, but punch a wall. Don't hit the nephew that's like 7 years old looking at you like, no. And it broke my heart when like the nephew fell on the ground and was like, get up, I'm gonna hit you again. And he did it.
He did it?
He did. He got up and like looked at his uncle. I was like, that's the servant mentality right there.
It really is. It really is. There comes a choice for the main character who's like, hey, I just stole the money. Am I coming back for my nephew? Or, am I just going to run away? And at the end of the day, because I believe that the author wanted the main character to feel a little bit more likable, he comes back for the nephew.
You see the kind of the character growth of the nephew, because the example of like when he punched him, fell on the ground, he said like get up, and he get up to get hit again. At the end of the book, he's like blackmailing his uncle for like ice cream because he knows that his uncle killed someone, right? So he's like, well, give me more ice cream or I'm gonna tell on you, pretty much. So like his nephew is grown to become a little bit like him. He kind of left the servant,
I really believe so, and I kind of like that because the nephew, he was smart enough to understand that, hey, my survival depends on my uncle. Yeah. So I'm not going to say anything, but I know that he's the one that causes the death of all our family. So I kind of like that because I feel that the nephew, who now goes to like one of the best school, he has a better life, and the nephew knows that he has a better life. Yeah. He has something that he saw like the masters have. It's not something that he could even dream of. So I kind of like the fact that, hey, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't feel like the nephew likes his uncle, but it's like, hey, I survived on you, and I gotta do what I gotta do. And frankly, the uncle, I don't even think he likes the kid either, but he's providing him with, and I feel like he's doing that also for himself because he likes the fact that he can provide the best for his nephew. But I feel like I would have liked to see a little bit more of like that
their relationship.
Their relationship.
Yeah, it could have been a very interesting one, but we only kind of touch it in the last 5 pages of the book or something. But
True.
It promised a good future for the nephew and for the main character too.
We know that it's not at the end of his journey. He owns like a taxi company basically, but he's going to get bigger. And
he says it. He wants to go into like real estate, and then he wants to create a school for like poor children in the darkness. And he wants to do a very good thing with his money. He treats his employee as actual employees and not servant, which is very different from the other companies. So they have contract, they have salaries. He takes the blame if anything happens. If one of his employees kills someone on the road, it's his responsibility, not the driver. So he changed a lot of the mentality from being himself a servant, right? But
he's still as corrupted though.
Yeah, of course. He went to the police and gave a bunch of money and like fucked so many companies over. One thing that I read for me was one of the most interesting part of the book is how does society work? But most importantly, how the corruption work in this place. There's a lot of description of when it's election time, for example, the politician will build the foundation of an hospital as like a proof that they're gonna build an hospital in an old village in the darkness. And then they get elected and they're like, yeah, no. And they create like hospital with actual doctor, and they pay a doctor, but the doctor just don't come to the hospital, so people die there alone. And there's a lot of examples like that are very hard to read, heartbreaking, but very interesting from like when you're not in it, right? And what did you think about that depiction of society?
I felt Well, at first I was just like, yeah, that's realistic. But I think that the thing that really cemented it
Yeah.
was the voting. So basically, and that
Their
shocked me.
democracy.
And that shocked me truly. Oh my God. All right, so basically our main character, he doesn't know his age. He didn't have a name really at first. But basically they kind of chose for him. They were just like, yeah, you're 18. Yeah, you're 18. And basically they did that with the whole like village. And they take those votes and the masters will, take those votes and put it in whatever
Party
that they want to. And it's like, God damn.
They're not even hiding it.
They're not even hiding it, yeah. And they're saying that some people who try to vote like themselves, they got beat up.
Yeah, they're
people
dead.
were just like, hey, it's my right. It's a democracy. I want to vote. And even like people who are a victim of that are just like, what are you saying?
No.
He's gonna get beat up. And yeah, they do. And I was just like, oh my God.
The people in the village has all voted for the same person. That never happens. Nobody in politics will ever get 100% of the vote. But they did in this village because nobody's voting. It's insane.
It's really... Oh. All right, my love. What's your reading for this book?
Oh, all right. My reading for this book. It was a little long for me. I wish it would have been a little shorter for some reason. I would have liked more description of the environment and less of his life. Because at one point it became repetitive. Like I understood that he was trying to get out of the servant mentality and everything. So I was seeing his progress, right? So I wish it was more about the society, I guess. But I will still give it I Stare at the Wall for an hour.
Oh, okay. Well, I have the same I Stare at the Wall from...
Really?
Oh, yes, I do.
Alright.
Frankly, I didn't mind seeing like much of his life. I didn't need more of the society because I felt that the society influenced so much his life that
you could see
I
it
could
through
see
it.
it. True.
Fair.
I think I would have loved seeing a little bit more because again, the story it's 95% of him getting beat up. 2% of him like, hey, like doing something about it at the end, truly, and finally when he succeeds, I would have seen a little bit more of him succeeding.
Okay, more happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very dark book in a sense. I agree.
True.
Next week, we decided to leave the dark, try to go a little bit lighter, a little bit happier. So we're gonna read Dial A for Aunties, which is a book about Aunties, Asian Aunties that it's a family that all work for a wedding company together, and there's a little drama happening, and they try to get away with it. So if it interests you, you can read it. I will put, however, the trigger warning on the screen. So if it's not in your comfort zone, please respect yourself, don't read it. But if you don't care, then go ahead. And we'll see you next Wednesday for Dial A for Aunties.
All right then, well, goodbye, my loves.
See you next week.
See you.